The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, I'm Joni Siegel, the host of the Addiction Podcast. In 2022, over 100,000 people died from drug and alcohol abuse, and that number is growing daily. Fentanyl poisoning, pot, cocaine, heroin, and even psychedelics and alcohol all contribute to this crisis, while we're bombarded with promotions from thousands of rehabs. Newborns are born addicted, and the majority of homeless people struggle with drug addiction. Drug dealers exploit online resources to sell to teens, and antidepressant use is spiraling out of control. This podcast features brutally honest guest interviews revealing harsh realities and offering hope and solutions through their stories. We don't sugarcoat anything. Guests speak raw and real. More importantly, you'll find inspiration to understand, overcome, and achieve recovery, whether for yourself or to help others, some within your own family, many among your friends or associates. Whether you're seeking help or just a glimmer of hope, our podcast equips you with the latest insights to confront this generational battle. Many listeners tell us they want to join the fight, but do not have the time or money to act, lobby, or just help. If that's you, go to www.patreon.com/theaddictionpodcast and see how you can help. Jim Wilfred, thank you for talking to us today on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jim, I read that one of your sons passed away in 2023. Can you share what happened with him?
Yeah, what's happening with too many people today. Austin liked to smoke his marijuana. He liked to drink his beer. And he was given a joint, and it was laced with fentanyl. And he's now dead.
Oh, my goodness. That's poisoning. That's not overdose. That's not addiction. That's
100%.
Just flat out fentanyl poisoning. And I'm just going to say this right off the top. If you're listening and you're smoking marijuana, or your kids are, or your friends are, you're playing Russian roulette, and you need to take a look. I don't care whether it's legal. It doesn't matter. Right. You could still be smoking fentanyl, and it only takes once.
Hi, my name is Amy Newman, and my husband Bobby and I have a business called Newman Intervention Services. We provide intervention services for families who have loved ones struggling with drug addiction. Our goal is to help individuals get the support and treatment they need to overcome addiction and start on the path to recovery. With our personalized and compassionate approach, we guide families through the challenging process of getting their loved one into rehab and onto a road of a healthier future. Together, we can make a positive difference in the lives of those affected by drugs. If you or someone you know is in need of an intervention, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let's work together and bring hope and healing to those battling addiction.
Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
Yeah, only once.
It only takes once. How old was your son? And I'm so sorry about your loss.
Thank you. Austin was 23. 23 years old, advocate for Black Lives Matter, advocate for gay pride, underdog protector, would stay up all night to talk to somebody if he knew that they was having problems and they might relapse. He was there for everybody, and that's why it was such a devastation to hear he died from fentanyl. This kid that had a bracelet on when he died, stop heroin.
Gosh. I'm so sorry. That's just, it's why we do this podcast, because we hope that when you tell a story like that, that someone will listen and go, gee, I think my kid is smoking marijuana. Maybe we better have a conversation about it.
Definitely.
Oh, man. So, but you have your own history with addiction. Is that correct?
I do. And I want to touch one more thing on the marijuana, because there is so much conflict and contradiction. People think you can't die from it. There's been this test and that test. I tell you, it's true. It's really true. You can die from it.
You can die, and you can get addicted.
You can look on the web and you can find something to verify anything you want to say.
Exactly.
But I'm telling you that my son died from it, and the amount of fentanyl that was in his body with the marijuana was so tiny. They specifically told me they could tell very much clearly that he didn't do fentanyl, and that this was ingested through the marijuana.
Right. You know, the only time really we get bashed very much on this podcast is when we speak out against marijuana. You know, I know, okay, maybe some people need it medically, and, you know, if they're getting it medically and they're getting it safely, that's fine. But this whole push to legalize it recreationally, and that's on the ballot in Florida, it's like you just don't know what you're smoking. And that is the scariest thing out there. And I've said it over and over again. You want to play Russian roulette? You might as well get a pistol and put the one bullet in and do it for sure. Because when you do these drugs, you have no idea what you're smoking.
Yeah, or taking.
No.
Yeah, they're up to 80%. 80% of the drugs on the streets now has a lethal dose of fentanyl in it.
That's so unbelievably scary.
Yeah. So, but you asked about my story.
I did. Take us back.
All right. So, 2004, I got sober. Okay. 18 years. I was in heavy substance use disorder, very heavy. I was putting a needle in my arm. Methamphetamine was my choice. If I couldn't do that, it was crack cocaine. I had tried the downer pills and stuff. I just didn't like them.
But how did you start, Jim? I mean, you didn't obviously start with a needle in your arm. How did you start?
No, I did. Okay. So, you know, my brother offered me a joint at 13. And that would be the first time that I'd ever tried anything. And I lived in the not so great parts of South St. Louis. And so it was prevalent everywhere. There was needles in my alley back in 1973. But I didn't really pick up there. It was, my father died at the age of 16, and I found him of a heart attack on Father's Day. And my mother decided to move us out of where we was growing up in Houston, Texas, to come back home to St. Louis. And she did that in a one-day period. So everything I knew, everybody I loved, all my friends, my first girlfriend, it was gone. And immediately I turned to whiskey. I found that if I would go steal a bottle of whiskey from the local grocery store, I would get invited to the parties. And so it was my fast track way to meet people and be cool. And that's how my alcoholic adventure started.
Okay. So you were that, but you had your first joint at 13, but it was 16 when you moved to St. Louis and became the life of the party, so to speak.
Yes. Yes. So I could fit in because I didn't feel good about it.
I got it.
Hurting.
Did you finish high school?
I did. I'm very blessed. I have a relatively intelligent brain. And even though when I came to the 10th grade in St. Louis, I was enrolled in classes like chemistry and biology 3 and trigonometry and all this stuff, and I was doing well. As soon as I started drinking, I just dropped down. I had all my credits, so I just went to nothing. I went to home ec, I went to art, I went to study halls, and I still passed on time.
Okay. Did you go to college?
I didn't. No. I stayed in. I went from the alcohol to immediately after school. I was missing Texas, so I hitchhiked to Texas to make it out on my own. And that was the first time I was in a bad part of Houston, Texas, living, and a gentleman was putting cocaine in his arm. And I said, I want to try that. And that's where all that started.
And there you go.
I was about 19, I say.
Okay. And you got sober in 2004, and you had been addicted
Yes.
for how long? You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. We appreciate you listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. We don't do this podcast because we are former addicts. We don't do this podcast because we have loved ones who have suffered from addiction. We do this podcast because we feel that addiction is one of the biggest problems facing the world today, and that no matter who you are, no matter your religion, no matter your income status, no matter your race, no matter anything about you, addiction affects you. This podcast is a free resource for anybody looking for help with it.
About 18 years off and on
Okay.
of some pretty heavy use.
Okay. And you had children at some point and were married at some point?
I did. I've been married 5 times.
Okay. All right.
I love, but I had my first sons in active addiction.
Okay.
I had just started using, and my wife was pregnant with Lucas, my oldest son, and she was good and didn't do anything. And I was slowly picking up my drinking, getting heavier and heavier, and slowly dabbling in the cocaine. And immediately following, I mean, it was 11 months between, we had Austin. So we had one right after the other. And after she had the second son, her thought was, well, now it's my time to party. And so that's when it started getting pretty hectic.
I got it.
And they was little guys.
Right. And now both their parents are doing it.
Well, and the thing is about Tracy, their mother, she's not like me and like some of us are. She could do the drug and leave it alone. She could do the drug and put some back and save it for some other time. And I was always, how the heck did you do that? I had to do all of it, no matter what, every time, no matter what we got. And, so she was doing the drug because I was bringing it home. And that's the truth.
Okay.
And she tried to save them boys by leaving me and taking off because I was very, very low bottom. I was living in the streets. I put Tracy and our boys, I pulled over a police officer to ask him, please lock us up in his jail because it was -10 on 2 days before Christmas and we didn't have nowhere to go. And that's the kind of life I was living.
Understood. Well, what made you get sober?
I got locked up.
Oh, okay.
Now, here's the thing. So a lot of us out there, if you're active in substance use and you've been very active and you've been stuck on that train, you already know, or if you've gotten through this, but a lot of other people don't understand this. For somebody that's that active in addiction, I didn't want to be using. I did not want to be using. I hated it. I hated what it did with my life. My wife had taken off with my boys. I was living drug house to drug house, out in the streets. I was robbing people. I was doing whatever I could to get my drugs. I didn't want to. But the thing is, if I didn't stay high, I thought about all that stuff that was going on in my life and my kids. And so it was so depressing. I would wound up in a ball and cry. I wanted to die because I didn't have the strength to quit, and I couldn't do it. And so many people shun upon users and think, why don't they just quit?
Exactly.
I'm trying to explain that right now. It ain't that easy, and it's not that the user doesn't want to quit. It's if they might want to quit and say, I'm ready, I want to go to a treatment center. You got to get that person there now.
Yep. Because
you know what? Within 30 minutes, if somebody shows up with that drug again, they can't help but to go ahead and take that drug.
That's right. And I've said this over and over again because we we hear that with people, that have been on the podcast, and the people around them just kind of, parents especially, go, why can't he just stop? And what they don't understand is these drugs are not just, they're physically addicting, they're spiritually addicting, and they're mentally addicting. And
Yes.
it's not that simple. We all wish it were. We wish we could walk up to every addict on the street and go, hey, just stop today, okay? And they all go,
Yeah.
okay, and walk away from it. It's just not that simple. And I know that people don't understand it, but you're saying it again, so you had to get locked up to quit. Did you have access to any drugs in the joint, or did you just quit?
No,
Because
it was a funny thing. Now, God is a big part of my saving grace also. The night before I was going to get locked up, there was a guy that was going to kill me because I didn't bring his drugs to him. He pulled out his knife, and I'm ready to die. And I was so happy that I was about to die, because I'm telling you, you don't want to live no more. And the guy says to me, I see it in your eyes, you want to die. And I was going to take you out, but it won't satisfy me, and it won't do anything for me. And he just told me to get out of there. I lay down on the floor somewhere, and I cussed out God. First time I talked to God in forever, and I cussed at him and yelled, why didn't you let me go? I wanted to go. He seen it in my eyes. That was amazing, because that is exactly what I was thinking. I'm going to die now. It's going to be over. It's going to be okay. The next day I was arrested. And I said, God, I know now why you didn't let me die. I can't get any drugs if I'm in jail. And I spent 3 months in the St. Louis County Jail.
Wow. Did you go through, you must have gone through total withdrawal while you were in there?
Well, on methamphetamine, which is what I was doing, and crack, you don't go through much of a withdrawal.
Oh.
At least the stuff I was doing back then. This would have been 2004.
Okay.
But you sleep a lot. You get depressed. You start feeling feelings again. But if you do something to avert all that, you can make it through it. See, I was in jail, and I was doing it by myself, but not truly always by myself. I was calling on God, and I talked to him a lot, and there was true miracles that happened. I mean, true miracles.
Tell, what miracle?
Okay. So I didn't know God. The only Bible I ever read was a King James version, and it was in the age when I was about 10, the last time I seen it. At this time, I was 47 years old, and when I got into the jail, I was grateful to God. I really was. I was, thank you. Now I can't get drugs. And I seen a Bible, and it was the New Living Transition. So I opened it up and I looked at it. I'm like, oh, I can read this. God placed me into a jail cell by myself, which was not a common thing to happen in the St. Louis County Jail. So I'm there with that Bible, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, now what do I do? And I began talking this conversation with God, knowing now that, okay, I didn't die. There's something he's got going on.
Right.
He said, read the book of Proverbs. That's what I was told. Never knew a Bible in my life, anything about it. I read the book of Proverbs. The Proverbs is a book about this guy who had everything you could ever want. He had all the money, all the women, all the dancers, the singers. He had everything. But at the end of his life, he started realizing he wasn't happy. And he wanted to tell his sons, hey, I want to teach you guys, I had everything. And this isn't what it's about. If you want a happy life, then do this. And he talks about all these different ideas and things that you could do to make your life better. And by the time I finished that book, I'll never forget how I said, if I can live my life that way, I can have a good life. Because I had never lived my life that way. And that was where the journey began. Wow.
So you, fast forwarding a little bit, you have an organization, A Second Chance at Life. What's that all about?
I do. So I got out of jail, and I didn't have anywhere to go because I lost everything. My wife was living with another man with my boys. They was 3 and 4 at the time. So I went to what's called an Oxford house. That's a sobriety house where men can stay together as long as you're all wanting to be sober, and you go to meetings and so forth. Every day I would sit out on the back porch before I start my day, and I would pray and say, God, what do I do today? And I would write a to-do list, and I would do these to-do lists. And on that sobriety porch one day, as I was getting my life together and I was about to move up to different things, I made a promise to God. I said, God, I'm going to open a sobriety house. I'm going to do this because I learned so much how to get through this. I went from having 2 t-shirts and a pair of pants when I walked out of jail. 2 years later, I bought my first house for $180,000. And,
Wow.
you know, so I was able to figure it out. And I knew that if I could open a sobriety house and teach people what I did, they would make it.
Wow.
So in 2018, it finally came to that time where, okay, I'm ready financially, everything else. I'm gonna do this. So I started my company. It's called A Second Chance at Life, and the company was a nonprofit, basically designed just for sobriety homes. So own and operate sobriety homes. So I'm putting together all the logistics and the rules and how to do it, and getting people in place to do this. And I started having a lot of death in my family. My brother was in my house in hospice, and I nursed him to death. And then my sister died of COVID. And then my daughter was 3 months old. She died.
Oh no, 3 months?
In her sleep, yes. And then my nephew died. I was trying to help him get off of fentanyl, and he relapsed and he died, and he's 21. And then my son died. Every one of those was spread out over about 6 months every time. After my son died, well, so this 2.5 year period, I didn't file registration reports. So my company just kind of sit there. I had the name and that was it. So after Austin died, June 20th, 2023, I started thinking again about the company, but different purposes.
You know, to your credit, a lesser person without, this is my evaluation, without the faith that you have, would have gone back to drugs with all of that loss. So very well done you for staying sober and keeping your eye on the ball, your eye on the mountain, that you kept going and you know what I mean? Because I'm just saying, if a lesser person or a person without the faith and the intention that you have might have relapsed at that point, like lots of reasons to make it okay to relapse. You know what I mean?
Well, then I can tell you, after my daughter, I did relapse. I relapsed for about 6 weeks, and it was terrible. And but I have another daughter that's 17 years old, and she lives with me, and that snapped me out of it. If I go, because I was getting to the point, I don't care, and then I remembered my other daughter. I am the only body to take care of her, so I snapped out of it, and I started thinking about this idea of the company. And then when Austin died, I said, that's it. So that's my therapy. Well, what I do.
And thank you for sharing that and being honest about that. But you did pull out of it, and you are now helping other people, and that's huge. So what does your organization do? You said when you started it, you were going to have sober houses that were underneath that organization. Is that still what's happening with that?
That's still a desire.
Okay.
It's transferred. When Austin died, I want to talk about the stigma just a second too, because when Austin died, I fell into that stigma that many people do. For me, it was fortunately, it only lasted 5 days. I didn't want to tell anybody why my son died. I didn't want somebody to say, well, you're a bad parent or he's a bad kid, because neither one of those is the truth.
Right.
You know, and so I was afraid. But when I realized, wait a minute, my son, he wasn't a bad kid, and I'm not a bad dad. I did do good. So I came out of that stigma with an anger. And like I said, I knew my son didn't like fentanyl, and I knew that, so it was killed him. So I started looking in the St. Louis area. That's where I live. I wanted to find, I started looking for these organizations online, and there's lots of organizations online. You look into fentanyl and problems, and I found so many of them.
Yep.
And I joined these organizations one by one, and some of them will have you ask questions before you join. My question every time I got accepted was, who is in St. Louis? What's the name of the group in St. Louis that's doing something about fentanyl?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Mm.
Nothing. 288,000 residents in fentanyl. People dying like crazy.
Wow.
It's the biggest distribution through the Midwest. And nobody, no grassroots organization specifying on fentanyl. So that's when I said, okay.
I was going to say, there's a calling right there.
Yeah. So I reinstated the company. I redid all of its purposes. You asked what the purposes are, and now it has 5 main purposes that I had to write up for the 501c3 preparation. The first is awareness. I do awareness events, and I do a lot of them. At my awareness events, I'll set up a table with a lot of information on it. I will talk to people about the problems going on. I will talk about where this drug is coming from and what lack of participation the government has in taking care of it. And I'll talk about my son, and I'll have other people there that get to talk about their children. And there's a couple of main focus of the awareness events. One, my main thing, I want to reach other parents that are sitting in the stigma, that feel like there's nobody they can talk to and nobody's going to do anything anyway. And I want to bring them out into the fold and help them.
Yep.
Because I want to tell them, it don't mean your kid was a bad kid.
Or
And
you're a bad
not
parent.
No. And you
I mean,
have
unless you handed them the fentanyl and told them to take it, you're not
Yeah.
a bad parent. You can't be with them 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well, I think that's phenomenal. I mean, I think it's phenomenal, Jim, that you have an organization that you kind of stepped up and said, well, there isn't one, I'll do it. And give us the website, Jim.
a secondchanceatlife.org.
Okay. And who should go there? Who should check it out?
Everybody in the freaking United States.
Okay. Well, that was easy.
What we do is awareness events. So if anybody's ever wanted to participate in or just go and get educated, I deal with people in recovery. I have lots and lots of connections to get somebody into a treatment center fast, a detox center, a sobriety home, nationwide. Parents who are worried about their kids, and maybe their kids are thinking they want to stop. Get a hold of me. I get emails on there all the time about that, and I reach out. And here's the sad part. Another thing I do in this organization, that I'm also involved with an organization called Drug-Induced Homicide. Now, I help parents do the poisoning murder investigations on their child. And so that's another thing. That's somebody else that should get in there. If they might have a little bit of evidence or anything else of who gave that drug to their child, get a hold of it. Because there's prosecutions taking place. The police didn't do an investigation on my son, but my son's killer is locked up in federal prison because I did an investigation.
Yep.
And it's happening all over the place. And so I spend a lot of time doing that.
And they can reach out to you through the website, right? Just, is there a contact us page? Okay, good. Good.
There's.
You know, you make a huge point. You know, I've heard it before where, you know, sometimes with somebody dying of fentanyl, especially I think if the police department is maybe overworked or understaffed, you know, they just kind of look at it as a drug death. And it's not. It's an actual poisoning, and it's an actual murder because these dealers know there's fentanyl in the product. And so there needs to be more of an investigation. And, you know, if you listener know about this, you need to reach out to Jim. The website again is asecondchanceatlife.org, all spelled out. And
Yes.
you need to reach out to him. He's there. He's going to listen. He's been through it. He understands it. Jim, I think what
That's
you're
my
doing
advice.
is amazing and so needed and so awesome. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today on the podcast. I really do. And the website will go up on our show notes, and also I'll put up a little picture on the video, and we will hopefully be able to send people your way.
Okay. And the Facebook page too. Facebook is such a great way to meet and talk to people and everything else. The Facebook page is the same thing, a second chance at life.
Perfect.
So please do visit by.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, if all you did was listen to the first 60 seconds, you got it. I think one of the most important messages from this whole interview is his son, who was smoking legal marijuana that was laced with fentanyl, and he died. So if you think it's okay to smoke marijuana, sorry, but you're taking your life in your hands. And if you're allowing your kids to do it, they're taking their life in their hands. We'll come back again. We've got other interviews set up. And you may have noticed we're playing some older interviews that we think are particularly relevant. So have a great rest of the week. We're headed into the holidays, one of the worst times for addicts. So if you know somebody that needs help, get them into treatment now. If you need help, get into treatment now. We'll be back.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.